Hey
Okay.
everyone, back to the She Who Wins podcast. And I am here today with a super special guest. Her name is Julie Wainwright. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because she's an entrepreneur. She's an e commerce pioneer with over 20 years of experience of building and growing technology and consumer businesses. She's the CEO and co founder of Ahara, a precision nutrition company, which she just launched a few years ago. And she previously founded The Real Real, which I personally have things in my closet from there. And she grew a leading luxury consignment company with over $1 billion in revenue. She's been named as Entrepreneur's 50 Most Daring Entrepreneurs, Fast Company's Most Creative People, CNBC's Disruptor 50. And she has a brand new book coming out June 10th called Time to Get Real: How She Built a $1 billion business and rocked the fashion industry. Julie, welcome.
Hi, thanks. That's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, you've done a lot.
I have done a lot.
So that's actually where I want to start because I love when I talk to people who have done who have these super impressive bios and they've done all the cool stuff. And I'm like, well, that's the thing that we see as success. But I know that with that success came the probably the 10 or 20 failures before that. So let's start there. Let's start with what were the hard things? Did you ever reach a point where you're like, I'm giving up, I'm quitting, I'm not doing this anymore?
Well, all right. So just to give you, I started my career at Clorox in brand management, and I was the second undergraduate they ever hired. And then I had a guy, I've got to talk about it because it was the beginning of my tech journey. A guy in finance smuggled in an Apple II computer way back when, maybe before your listeners were born. And he ran VisiCalc on it, which did all the P&Ls in literally once he set it up within a minute. And we used to hand do what ifs, meaning you'd say, what if the price changes? What if this goes? What if competition? And we'd have scenarios and you'd have to hand crank those P&Ls all the time. It would take all day. And all of a sudden, he does this. I'm like, oh my God, that's the future. And then I got a call to join a startup company in the software industry. I was 25. At Clorox, I was already for 25. I was making, I felt like a lot of money at the time. I was making 50 some $1,000s, probably significantly less than any other person, because I was an undergraduate, but it didn't matter. I was like, I'm making a lot of money. I'm too young to make this much money and not take risks. I felt like I wouldn't take a risk. When I got the call, I joined the tech industry. And I ended up in the age of 27 running international, living in London for this tech company,
Amazing.
which is
Amazing.
crazy. If it sort of blows your mind when you think of like a
Yeah.
27, 28-year-old moving to London, didn't know anyone. I did have a boss originally, but he got fired. And then it was just me setting up partnerships all over the world. So I was flying all over the world in my 20s. And it was a great grounding for that. And actually, everything was sort of rolling along until, and then I ended up taking a job with the spinoff of that company after 8 years, and again moved overseas. And then that was sold, came back to the States, had a job where I walked in as a VP of sales and marketing. It was called Berkeley Systems. And it was failing. And I wrote a plan to turn it around with the CFO and presented it to the board. And they said, okay, you run it, you're president. And then they went, okay, you're CEO. And I did turn it around.
Amazing.
The founder wanted to sell the company. Then I went to a company called Real.com, which was the first site to sell movies online, and got that going, got it up in sales, got an offer from Hollywood Entertainment, which was Hollywood Video, to sell the company. The founder wanted to sell. We got out. Then I went to, and this is where, so everything's like, wow, wow, wow. And then I got married in the middle of that. And then I got married when I lived in London. I met a Brit. That's what happens when you live in London. You meet a lot of British people. And then I was offered the job as the CEO at pets.com. And I took that, was the first site to sell pet food, but there were 6 others funded, took it public. And then the funding dried up, and I had a choice: run it, which I thought toward bankruptcy, or shut it down. I should have continued the company and just cut all expenses because the funding had dried up, and the theory was the money wasn't going to come back for a couple of years, and the company would have to declare bankruptcy. So I wanted to do the right thing for the shareholders. I shut it down with a net positive worth. Never has been done. Probably never should be done. But you know, I could have been wrong. I was right. The funding didn't come back. The window for opportunity for raising more capital didn't come back, but I could have been wrong. So, but here's what happened. When I shut down Pets, the press was so negative on that company, and it was considered the hallmark of the dot-com bust. This is 25 years ago. And my husband left me the same day. He's like, I don't want to go through this. It's going to be a rough time. I'm out.
And so that was okay. So
when you talk about a dark day, I know it took a long time to get there, but I had to show like everything was great, and then it just crashed and burned.
So in like a 24-hour, 48-hour period, you had a business go belly up and a marriage do the same. So
obviously it's not like, oh, what a surprise, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I have to say, him asking me for a divorce that day, that morning when I was shutting the company down, and he knew, that was a surprise. But not that the marriage was great. We were working on it, but yeah. So the fact that he picked that day was a big surprise, and almost like I felt like he was piling on. You know, I hadn't slept well, so yes, it was really bad. So that night, I went home to a house that was empty, although I did have dogs. But I went home to a house that was empty and had no job, except I had to continue the shutdown of the company.
So and I want to just spend a second talking about this because so many of my listeners are women who have gone through a divorce, or they're in a divorce, or they have these major life changes. How did you pick yourself up from that? Because I do hear women say, well, how do I get on the other side? And the resilience is lacking at that moment because of everything that's happening. Like, what was there anything you did, or did you just get up and be like, I have no choice. I'm just going to get dressed and put on my makeup and just like carry on?
Well, I also had a lot of, you know how people think people talk about you, and they really don't, because no one really cares about other people that much. But actually, the press was talking a lot about me, and in a very negative way. So I had this outside negativity, and I'll tell you the bad thing. I didn't just get up and get going. Originally, I didn't know I would just be bombarded with negative press, and that carried on when I'd meet new people. You know, it became, I mean, it was just very uncomfortable because I had people get angry at me at events. You know, it was just bad because I and the company epitomized. Probably they lost a lot of money. They thought of it as excess. Who knows? So I would say I pulled in, not great, pulled in very close friends. I didn't do a lot socially. I kept working out and being out in nature, which helped. I find being around creative people, because both my parents were artists, to be a soul satisfying thing, to be around people who are envisioning the world in ways I didn't think about it, and looking at sort of amazing things they're creating. But the bad news is I took on that whole helm of outside failure. And when I look back at pictures, I'm just moving into a house. Right before this, I was arranging some pictures, and I don't think I have any from that time, but I know I have some somewhere. My shoulders are down. You know, it was bad. And I would say I carried it almost to the point where, because, you know, the other thing with a divorce, and everyone knows this, and I don't know what other states' laws, but in the state of California, there's no fault divorce. So I was the prime earner in the family. And, you know, you built up a little nest egg, and then all of a sudden you have half. Yeah. You know, so at some point, I'm like, I'm going to run and I was taking bad jobs. I mean, it was just bad. Let's just say it was
Yeah.
bad, but I had to keep going, but it wasn't in a good frame of mind. And at some point I realized the more I focus on the past and let others define me, the more I carry that into the future. And my hard stop, it wasn't even a hard stop, but it was this gradual buildup of recognizing, hey, I had all this success before. I've had one failure. I remember even sitting at a baseball game and this person was like, oh, this batter's great. And he was hitting at 35%, 0.35. And I'm like, that
Yeah.
means 65% he's losing. How can that
Yeah.
be great when I've had one failure and it's like, it's defining me? And just when, anyway, so I've decided I've got to get out of these. I took a couple really bad jobs that were sucking out my soul. I met with a recruiter and he told me basically, you're washed up. I think his words were, no one's going to offer you a good job because you have a big failure in your past and you haven't done much since then.
Oh, the horror.
So, and
It's
at
crazy.
that time, I was 52 and I was running out of money. I mean, I luckily had invested, I got the house and the divorce, but I didn't have that much cash in the bank. So then I had to make a decision, a really hard decision, but it had been building up. And I thought, okay, this guy doesn't know me. He knows a version of me. But I took what he said as true because impressions become realities for other people. And I decided, no, I've had this great career up until this. I know what I'm made of. I'm gonna start my own company, and I'm also going to put my house on the market because if I don't come up with a great idea or it fails, because businesses fail, um, then I'll have to figure out another plan. And at that point, and I write about it in my book, I'm like, the worst thing I could think about was going someplace really, really hot with snakes. And that was Arizona to me. Some
Yeah.
someplace like I'll have to move to Arizona and take up yoga. And I hate yoga. And I know people love yoga, but for me, it's like a cult. And I just like
Yeah.
it represented cult like thinking. And I'm not a cult follower. So it took a long, long time, but it was a gradual healing. And
Yeah.
then I swear, and then honestly, once I made the decision, it really was like Cher slapping Nicolas Cage and Moonstruck and saying, snap out of it. It was like I did it, like
Yeah.
I had to do that to myself. But it wasn't like one day I woke up and I was healed. And I'll tell you something interesting because I I made a decision to do this and I'd started the Real Rail, and a year into it, right when I was about ready to raise capital, I hadn't been out in the public before, since pets. I was sort of laying low, hadn't done anything, no public appearances. And I was speaking at this big conference that was arena style seating, and there were judges there. And I was pitching the Real Rail. And I had a panic attack before I went on the stage.
Mhm.
And that was that old stuff coming up again that
Yeah.
I was going to be judged. I've never had one at first. So I'm like, oh, so originally you think I'm like having a heart attack. What is this? I couldn't catch my breath. So I sat down, took breaths, drank water. Um, and then I looked at one of the judges, and one of the judges had done something really sleazy in investing. And that person had asked me for my plan and had been courting me and understanding the business because we were already a year into it. We were already 10 million. And she had invested in a competitor like 3 days later. So not illegal, nothing, but sleazy. She should have told
Yeah.
me because she really just wanted to understand my economics, and that was bad.
Yeah.
She was a judge at this event. Seeing her pissed me off so much, I got over my panic attack.
Isn't that funny? Anger. Anger is great motivation.
but but it does show that it like that trauma was lingering.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't aware of it and I thought, no, I'm past this, it was still there. That was the only time it happened though.
What I love from that story is the fact that you said you were 52 when you decided you were going to start something new, when you were sort of, I don't know if you want to call it rock bottom, but it was
It
I
was
did all
not
of these
good.
things. It wasn't good, right? But you were 52, which is incredible because you reinvented yourself. And it's like I think people think when you get to a certain age, and I'm hovering close, damn close to 50, but it's like the thing that you have done up to this point is always the thing you have to do forever and ever, and it's just not the case. Like there's so much more opportunity on the other side of that, and I love that story.
Well, I mean, the beauty of being in your 50s, right? Just first of all, the 50s are great. I think the 40s, especially when you look back, the 40s are a period of did I make the right choices?
Yeah.
And sometimes choices are made for you, but um, the 40s are interesting. If you navigate the 40s, you're good. But there, it's a little bit like surfing because a lot of people have kids. The
Yeah.
marriage could be great. It could not be great. Their career could be great. Could not be great. It's a weird time because you've
Yeah.
already like tested yourself, and it can be great. But I would say most people have a little bit of an reckoning in their 40s. If they don't, it hits in their 50s. But let's say you get through that little whatever, conscious decisions that you made or unconscious ones, and you're good. The 50s are awesome if you have your health because then you're like, I know what I am. I know what
Yeah.
I'm good at. If you have your health, you'll luckily have energy. And when you make a decision to do something, you can focus more in your 50s because you don't have the distraction. I'm
Yeah.
just going to talk to women because I don't, but
Yeah.
either you're married or you're not married. So you may want to, maybe you're divorced and you're going to have to get out there again, but you know more than you did when you're in your 20s. You
Hmm.
either had kids or you didn't have kids. You may have a situation where you're taking care of your parents, but maybe not yet. Maybe not yet. Maybe
Yeah.
that comes in your 60s. So you have this time where it can be incredibly creative. You can stay really focused, and you don't have other distractions. And I didn't, by the way, everything I'm saying I didn't know, but now that I'm through it,
Yeah.
it's such a good time in life. And you also don't put up with a lot of stuff because you're
Yeah.
like, no, 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 I got this. And so yes, I had to reinvent myself. Otherwise, I would have had a different life, a life I didn't envision myself living. And it worked. How's that? And it worked.
Yeah. I love so I'm 48, and my favorite part of the latter part of 40s is like my tolerance for inauthenticity or people who are BSing me, and like you just don't have it. And I felt like I think earlier on in my 40s and certainly 30s, like as a woman, you're so worried about people pleasing and so worried about the perception of the outside world. And now it's kind of like I don't give a F. Like you can talk all you want, you can, but I think there's a freedom in that. And that's
I,
what I
oh,
hear is
it's
like it's even
such.
gets even better.
Well, it gets better. Now in my 60s, I really have no tolerance.
Yeah.
I have no tolerance
Yeah.
for people who lie to me. I have
Yeah.
no tolerance for uh, just all of that. And your sensors are even more heightened to that.
Yeah. Okay, so question then for you, because you brought up something earlier on that I want to go back to, and you talked about risk, because I do think that that's the thing that women are afraid of. Women are afraid often of taking a risk. And in my world, in my brick and mortar business, sometimes it's the risk of being alone or not having necessarily that financial stability. I know a lot of women who they're afraid to go big on their business. They're afraid to really scale because there's a risk to that. And so, how do you reconcile taking that calculated risk with the idea that, well, maybe it doesn't work out and what happens? Like, I feel like guys are great at risk, but women, maybe not so much.
All right. So I am a little weird in that I am more of a risk taker
Yeah.
than most women. When I left Clorox, I was the first one they brought you in classes. So I was the first one to leave and embrace the tech world. And my general manager there said, you'll never meet as many smart people as you met here. You'll never have the stability as you do here. And I'm like, oh, come on. I'm like, so when I moved to London, I didn't know anyone. So my general demeanor is more risk taking. Now, when I failed, here's the beauty of the failure, which again, who knew? It frees you up when you fail, because once you fail, you're like, and you get through it, which I did, you're like, okay, I lived through it. And with pets.com, I had such public scrutiny. I figured no one's going to do that again because the world's changed. I'm not going to have that much scrutiny.
Yeah.
But I came through the other end. And then you realize you don't live unless you take risks, and failure doesn't hurt you unless you let it define you, which I did for too long. It doesn't hurt you. It actually makes you smarter and wiser. And it gives you a comfort that I got this. Even when I fail, I've got this, because failure is a weird word. It's like, you get an F on a test, even starts with F. But in fact, it's all learning. It is all learning. And I would say, for me personally, as a woman, I was always afraid of not having my own money. Because I saw women all around me and my mother's generation, and I still see it, women making decisions because they are afraid they can't make their own money. And they're making decisions out of weakness, not strength. And they may not even be conscious of it. And so consequently, I knew even at a young age that I needed to make my own money. So when if I was in a partnership or doing anything, I wasn't dependent on them for something vital in my life. I didn't want someone to have that unequal power balance in my life. Yeah. And money does that. In terms of how to take risks, I think when you get older, you're afraid that you've got this pile and why do it? And then, but I talk to people all the time about their businesses. And sometimes small is good. As long as you feel you're making enough money, you still have to make money. If you love what you do every day. So, not everyone has to go big, at all. But if you believe there's an opportunity, then just plan it out step by step. But look, when I started The Real, I knew it was going to be big. I knew it was going to be huge. And my first 3 years in the business, I underestimated the expenses, but I said, we're going to hit 100 million in 3 years. And all the VCs are like, you're not going to do it. Well, we did it. Amazing. And so I thought, well, if you do 100, you can do 500. So, but I knew it was going to be big, and there was a lot of joy in creating something that big, and also good for the planet. I mean, I think know your values, know your priorities, and in terms of being alone, you brought that up. Some women are afraid they're going to be alone. I think about that all the time, and it's a real fear. I mean, it's out there. But then I think, gosh, I don't know. I've got great friends, and I'm more than fine on money, and I've got great health. What's so bad?
Right. I know.
I mean, it's like 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. 1 + 1 could be 1.4. And so then you're like, I don't know. That doesn't mean I'm not open to it, but it would have to be someone who added to my life. So I think that fear, that's just a fear of, it's hard to be lonely when you actually like yourself and you like the people around you.
So it's so interesting because when I got divorced the first time, my son was 2. I had just started my business a year before, and I was a business of 1. And I knew that, though. I knew that I had what it took and the grit and the hustle to make money. And I didn't want anything from my ex. I felt guilty for wanting a divorce, but aside from that, I'm like, I can do this myself. But that was the thing. And it was those weekends where I felt lonely because I didn't have someone, that I was like, all right, I'm going to put my time and energy into building something, into growing something. And that created that opportunity. It was such an opportunity. What was something like really, really hard was an opportunity to be like, I'm going to be financially independent. because I don't want to ever have to make a decision based on, can I afford to pay my rent or my mortgage or whatever it is, or have to because or stay in something that's not a good fit. And you see that all of the time too. So I love
all
you
the time.
talking about like women owning their financial independence. It's so important. So important for us to know our numbers and like take control and ownership and responsibility for it. So I have so many clients that they're not the ones who pay the bills, or maybe they're not the earners, and I'm like, okay, now's the time. Then don't just sit there and wait for your spouse to maybe pay you alimony. You don't want to wait for that check. Go create your own check, right? Because there's so much more freedom in that. So
Oh,
I love that
and it's
perspective.
also, you find out, look, I'm sure you went through this, you grow so much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's exciting to know you have all of that in you. Look, when I started the Real Real, I hired a lot of young people, just a lot, and most of them women, by the way, most of them
Mm-hmm.
women, and including my first employee, who's now the CEO. I saw them, a growing business puts demands on everyone, and people can either step up and take more, or they tend to leave because it's too much. But the ones who had that great capacity to keep going and learning and stepping up, I saw these younger people just flourish. And they
Yeah.
had no idea how good they were. I mean, it's remarkable. And then the more they took on and the more they succeeded as a CEO, the more I wanted to give them, because it helped the business, it helped them, and they could always, and some people said no. And when they said no, at some point they would leave because
Yeah.
the business did demand you to step up. But it's like I saw them change. I saw them go from someone who, was excited about working but not sure of their skill set, to someone who commanded a room
Right.
and knew
Ah,
what
I
they
love
were
that.
good at.
I
Isn't
love
it?
that.
It's great. And
Love
that's what happens to everyone as you learn and grow. And I think the more you have to keep that mindset, everything you do adds to you if you have a learning mindset,
it. Yeah.
including, not succeeding.
And
Everything you do.
and I'm sure you talk about that in your book, which we'll get to in a second. But I do want to go back and ask you something, which I'm curious about how you navigated the VC world when what is it like? Women get 1%
Less
or
than two,
3%?
less
Yeah,
than two, less than two.
crazy. And so you did this so long ago, the numbers were probably even worse. Like, what challenges did you find there where you were immersing yourself into a male dominated space and having to be bold and ask and know that the doors could be slammed in your face? Like, what was that like?
All right. So first of all, it's gotten worse. Just to put it out
Yeah.
there, it's gotten worse. But um, and I'd raised money before, so that wasn't unknown to me. I would say every person who goes out, whether it's a venture capitalist or raising money from others, you get a lot of no's. So you've got to be comfortable with no's. Now, I also had, and I knew this, I had pets.com still looming in the background. Every venture capital firm asked me about it. And I had a business, at least where I am, in Silicon Valley, that men didn't get. All right. So I knew it was going to be hard. So I waited till the business was at 10 million in sales before I raised a venture capital round. Now I had raised a little bit of other money before
Yeah.
then, but when I went out for the first institutional round, and it was, as expected, bad. A lot of no's. My favorite one, which I do write about in the book, when this guy put his, can I cuss on your show?
Yes, you can.
Okay, put his ugly ass shoe on the desk and said, "See this shoe?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he said, "I've had it for 5 years. And I don't know why you think people are going to give you their used things." And I said, he goes, "What do you think of that?" I go, "You're not my customer,
Yeah.
period."
Hmm.
So, it's like, now that was a jerky move, right? It
Yeah.
was a jerky move. Um, so that was an extreme example, but they were all sort of bad.
Yeah.
So I tried things like before I went in, I would call the assistants because they all had young women as assistants that were almost all gorgeous, by the way. And I would say, can I give you a coupon to try the Real Real? So I tried that, to like chum the waters a little. Never worked. Didn't work.
Yeah.
The chumming didn't work, but I probably got a couple of customers. And then I went into one firm. All you need is one. Yes, I went into one firm, and the venture partner male knew me before, so I said, Eric, can I come in? His name was Eric Young. I want to pitch the business. He said, yeah, come on in. And he's listening to it. He goes, I need to bring my partner Maha in here. Maha's a woman. Maha comes in. She's like, this is amazing. Hadn't heard about it yet. She's like, okay, give me a week. Can you come back and present to the partners? And in the meantime, I'd gotten in touch with Eric's wife. We'd gone to their house. We'd done a pickup. All right. So, you have to be smart because you have to
Yeah.
assume you're going to fail. And you're going to fail anyway when
Yeah.
you raise money. So you're trying to pull all the levers. And anyway, she was the first investor. Maha Ibram at Canaan, again, a woman. She understood it completely. Eric said in the partners meeting, which is, I'll tell you how that works. So you're sitting there, usually in a huge conference room, big table, all the partners are there. You're presenting your business. They're all asking questions. I think I was there. I don't think I had a real CFO then, but I had my CTO, Rachi, who's now the president, was with me, probably a couple other people, but we were a really lean staff. And Eric says, I just don't understand this service element and going to someone's home. My wife would never let someone. I'm like, Eric, we were there last week. And he's like, whoa, he about fell off the chair. So I would say you have to be a little crafty. Here's the other
Yeah.
thing we did, which we found out the hard way, because I was raising money every 6 months for 10 years. I mean, literally every
Wow.
6 months for 10 years. So the other thing we did is we went out, one venture capital, a very well-known firm, was so excited. And then we went, he's like, oh, I'll do it. My wife, wants a pickup. So we did a pickup at her home, but we couldn't. She didn't have anything that was considered a luxury brand. And about the next day, we were supposed to have another big meeting. And Eric's like, we're going to pass. And I said, yeah, you're going to pass. He goes, yeah, I just don't believe in your market. I'm like, oh, so what data? He goes, well, the luxury market's not that big. The luxury market's huge. It's hundreds of, billions of
Yeah.
dollars. And he said, no, I just think the market, you've overestimated the market. I go, well, what about this data? He goes, Julie, I have a mosaic of information. And I'm thinking, your wife's closet. It really
Yeah.
came down to that. So the next venture capitalist that we went into, his wife, again, they always go to the wife. You can never be offended by these things, by the way. You just roll
Yeah.
with it until you don't. And then you're like, okay, thank you. Be nice. I mean, at some point I wasn't that nice because I was over 50. But in general, I tried to be. And
Flash at the same time. The shoes on the table. Yeah.
your head saying one thing, sometimes the barrier between the head and the mouth slips. And anyway, the next time we just picked up the wives' things, even though they weren't right. And we
Yeah.
picked it up and we put it on the site and we bought all of them over time. All
Yeah.
right. So next time we just played the game and the company bought them. We're like, it's worth whatever. We had to pay like $30,000 to possibly get the money. And we got the money, by the way. So, we just did what we had to do sometimes. But when you make that one mistake, you go to the partner's wife's closet. She has nothing that's luxury.
Yeah.
And she's very proud of her things that won't work on our site.
Yeah.
And yeah, we should have just picked them up and done it. So you learn how to be crafty. You learn how to play their game. It is important that you're always polite. Like I said, I'm sure I wasn't. I'm a little grumpy at times, but I tried to be. And look,
Yeah.
I never. Here's the other thing. I always knew we'd get financing, and every no was just like, okay, I'll find someone. I never let those no's affect me. I mean, I would find them humorous because I did write about some of them in the book. But I never let them like drag me down. I'm like, you know what? They're wrong. They're wrong. This is going to work.
I love that there is a trend now of more VC firms being female leaders, and I'm following a couple of them where they're specifically investing in female founded or looking for diverse founders. So hopefully that shifts things.
Well, all right, let me just give you some bad news. Sorry.
That's
But
okay.
um, Harvard, first of all, I don't believe in funds that only invest in females because that's sort of weird because then you're missing the essence of the
Hmm.
fund, right? You should, but Harvard Business School did, I love the Harvard Business Review. They did a study, it's not that old, but it was probably 20, it might have been 2017, 2018, how female founders, female VCs use are even harder on women, and they use the
Interesting.
exact they use almost the exact same words as the male VCs. And
Interesting.
what they've done is venture capitalists tend to tell women, well, when are you going to get profitable? How are you going to solve this problem? And when I'm generalizing, but it's a great study that you can find. And I write about it. They wouldn't let me publish the table because they had a table of all the words that the men and women use against women founders. They wouldn't let me publish it. So I had to replicate as best I could in the book. But the with men, when young men come in, they say, how big can you get? What do you need to succeed? How much market share? So with women, they're trying to already, and women do it too. And I would say that's an example of cultural habituation that they're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
I don't think they're aware of it. So I don't think the answer is look, if I wouldn't have had female VCs, I wouldn't have gotten funded.
Right.
But they acted like the men and started wanting me to get to profitability faster that would have ruined the company. And oddly, the men were asking me, how big can I get? So it flipped at some point. And
Interesting.
I sent out that Harvard Business Review survey to them. I'm like, you guys are doing this to me. And then we had one guy, Mike Cuman, who came on, who's like, the board was getting wobbly that way. And when he put it, he's like, are you guys nuts? Do you really think this isn't going to be a multi-billion-dollar company at some point? He didn't say nuts, but he's like, here's how I view it. He wouldn't say it. Those are my words. I'm thinking
Yeah.
Mike is saying that. No, he was much more diplomatic than that. But it's like, look, this opportunity is huge. They're the only one, and anyway, it changed the whole board dynamics, that and that study. So I would say we're so culturally habituated that we don't even know our built-in biases and whatever.
Yeah.
um it's always going to be hard. It's always going to be hard for anyone if you're not a white male. And I
Yeah.
know white males feel persecuted now, maybe not because of Trump,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, I would say if you buy into all the negatives around you, you're never going to be positive and succeed. So
Yeah.
you're just like, they're there. I'm aware of it. Just like us figuring out, okay, we lost this one because this guy's wife didn't have a luxury item. She clearly was offended. We didn't pick up anything. We're never going to do that again. If we're raising capital, we go into the wives' closet, picking it all up. We'll give it a good price. We'll take the bite, sell it, buy it ourselves, donate it. We'll just play the
Yeah.
game, just figure it
Yeah.
out.
So I'm slowly entering the tech market, but I had pitched with a team for a different product a number of years back. And I had a warm introduction to a VC. And this guy during the call, I mean, I felt like called me girl. Like it was the whole lack of, but what was most interesting about that is he called me up after. He's like, listen, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want anything to do with the other person who was the founder. He said, but when you have something else, you come to me. And that was so interesting because I'm like, I felt like it was like a Shark Tank times 10, right? With like the bombarding of all of the questions and all of that. But at the end of the day, he came back and was like, you know what? The investment is in the person who's the founder. And I thought that that was really interesting because as much of a hard ass that he was, it was really like it was he was really listening. And so it
Oh
was an
yeah.
interesting experience because I was like I hung up and I'm like, what just happened? And then after it was like, oh, like this actually was such an incredible learning experience.
Exactly.
That rejection was like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it next time. This is what I heard him say, what he didn't like about that. So we're going to fix it going forward. Like it's just, it's so interesting. It's
Well,
interesting to
see,
be a student again.
that's a gift. So the best VCs do help you shape your business or thinking, and they give you new things to think about. And they, they can be jerks and
Yeah.
assholes, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some learning there or
Yeah.
some good information. The worst ones were like that guy, see the shoe. That was just
Yeah.
not helpful. But that,
Right.
I would say my experience in Silicon Valley is most venture capitalists are, even if you don't like their exterior, they're they do give you helpful information. They're
Yeah.
not just jerks.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they're going to invest, but they're going to give you some ideas. I think there were a couple the other thing though you have to know when you're raising capital, I mean there are a couple of times where you're just like really, it's like stop. But when you're raising capital, if you get, I call them in the book the not knows, where they're like, oh, come back once you get this, that's a no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just part of them. They don't want to be left out or make a mistake, or but if they give you some hurdle to jump over,
Yeah.
just run. Don't even jump
Yeah.
over their hurdle, because that's like, they don't, a lot of them don't like saying no in case they're wrong.
So
And
funny.
so I don't know, it's just and you're just like, well, I'd like to see if you can do this. And I'm like, I am never talking to you again. It's like, but you don't have to say that,
Yeah.
but you should know that's the biggest no. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. I've seen so many entrepreneurs strung along. They said, if I do this to come back, I'm like, that's because they didn't want to tell you no. It's
Yeah.
really a no.
Well, I mean, that's in anything, right? Like tell me no and let me move on. Don't dangle this carrot that I can never reach. I mean, for anything. So, Julie, let's talk about your book because we just went off on this whole tangent. That was
But
my own
it's
like
useful. A
personal,
lot of that's in
right?
the book, by the way, because
I can't wait to
yeah, a
read
lot
it.
of it's in that book. All right, so let me tell you why I wrote the book, and then
Yes.
I want to tell you about something that intervened. I wrote the book because I had it's a great, first of all, it's a great story. Whenever you take something that's an idea in your head and it becomes $1 billion business. Um, so, but I also had an agent who really wanted me to write it for a while. And then I decided to write it because I continue to make mistakes and learn. I made mistakes that if I would have read a book like this, that was that candid and talking about, the thought process and here's where I went wrong, I wouldn't have made those mistakes. It would have given me a pause. I would have thought
Yeah.
differently. And so that was the whole purpose in writing the book. But then once I wrote it, and there's a lot of names in it. I mean, it's sort of fun. It's a fast read. Someone said, oh, I felt like I was reading the Wild Wild West. There was a moment where, because I have a publisher and they're like, well, you name a lot of names. And, they got worried about whatever legalities. And I'm like, well, and they said, if our lawyers don't like it, we're going to take out these sections. I'm like, well, then I don't have a book. And I'd already run it past my personal lawyers, and then I have my agent's lawyer. So we've been lawyered up on our side, but they're the publisher. They need their own point of view. I understood that, but then I thought, I don't have a book. And then I thought, well, do I need to publish it? And I thought, because it was fun writing it. I mean, there's some dark parts that required a lot of wine. That wasn't fun, but I was still glad I wrote the dark parts. And I was in London for a small vacation, staying at a fairly large hotel. And this young man who was a porter, who I saw the first day and the second day, never saw him after that. I was there about 5 nights. He said, Miss Wainwright, I know who you are. And I've been following your career. Now, here's a kid in London. He's probably 20. I don't know. And he said, I really hope you write a book someday because I think it would help people because I find what you do is inspiring. And he made me, and I said, oh, thank you. I burst into tears. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get this book out. I literally was teeter-tottering. And I don't know if it'll help people or not. I know it would have helped me if I read
Yeah.
it. And I am very honest, very candid about, mistakes I made, what I should have done, how I should have re-envisioned things. But I also wrote about every year. It's really, I had to do a little bit of background on myself, which was the most uncomfortable place. And I did the audio version of it. And when I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I didn't even, I know, because I'm like, who wrote this? Anyway.
Yeah. Isn't that funny when that happens? You look back and you don't even remember writing it.
I know, I'm like, oh God. But reading, then I go year by year, how I built it real. And I weave in the lessons I learned as we go. And I walk people through like when we really started talking about sustainability and the importance of sustainability. And I even reverse engineer the P&L of fast fashion companies and why they're treacherous, which people may not like, but I mean, they are treacherous in more than one way, both in terms of microplastics and building up landfills, but also the work conditions, even though we don't have visibility into the work conditions. But it's a fast read. It's a lot of stories. It's almost year by year. But I wrote it because I wish I would have had it. I wish I would have had this book. When my publisher was out selling the book, they said a couple of things. The publishers in general, women's business books don't sell.
That makes me so angry because I'm the audience for that, right? There's so many female entrepreneurs and female CEOs. Like, why not? We're reading.
Well,
We're
I have a
hungry for
theory.
that.
I have a theory. I tend to buy all women's business books when they come out.
Yeah.
But, if I know them or don't know them, if I see it promoted, I'm like, I'm buying that book. I would say if you read most of them, they're a little puffy.
Yeah.
They're a little promotional. And, I'm not sure that serves us.
Yeah. Well, and that's a whole nother conversation of why, right? Because you have these companies who are telling you how to build a personal brand and you write the book to promote the business, which makes me, as a writer, that makes me nuts because the book is supposed to be the book, not to sell into something. So I think that's probably what we're seeing. So we went, I usually do like half-hour interviews and we were like almost at the top of the hour. So this is amazing.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay.
That's okay. So what I want to do is any listeners out there, if you send me a DM on Instagram and tell me the key most incredible thing that you heard from this interview, I will, for the first 3 that do it, I will send you all a copy of Julie's book. So get on that and send a DM to me. I can't wait to read it myself. It comes out June 10th, which this episode will be dropping right around the same time. So Julie, my one final question for you, because the name of this podcast is She Who Wins. So my question for you is, what does winning look like for you?
Multiple things. One is winning for me was sort of reclaiming myself. Number one, that's probably the most important. Number two, I was able to give scholarships to students, to young women at Purdue. So I feel great about that. I'm able to give scholarships at Parsons for sustainable fashion. I feel great about that. And able to give money back to the arts, which I feel great. I'm on the board of MOCA. And it's actually just feeling safe. At least financially, I feel safe. And that's really important. It's really important. But I would say, and I put it almost in the right order there, just knowing and reclaiming yourself and knowing that you did it and no one can take that away from you. And no matter what people said, it didn't matter. That's what and like, I know myself, and just not listening to the critics, the outside critics, that's winning. That is winning. And feeling like I'm okay. You know what I mean? Like, stop with the noise. I'm okay. Yeah. That's it, babe. That's life. If you can love yourself, everything else is better.
Amazing. Oh my God, what a great way to end this. I'm so grateful for your time, and for you coming on here and sharing all of your wisdom. So thank you so, so, so much.
Thank you. I can't believe how it went. Thanks so much.
All right, let me stop the recording.